So we'll be looking at some of the principles for archiving and sharing data, and also identify some of the data that needs to be archived, and have a look at when we are archiving data, and also explore one common online data repository that can be used by researchers to archive and share their data. Okay, so maybe quickly, why do we think we should archive and share data? So can we get our responses or our opinions why we think this is important in the chat? Okay, for future reference, yeah. Okay, to allow researchers to build on the work of others, and also to archive for future reference and share valuable information with other participants. Yes, and yeah. So that it doesn't get lost and can be revisited anytime for safety. Yeah. And it saves time and cost to evaluate changes, to save time and cost to evaluate changes. Okay. For stakeholders to understand progress we are making towards achieving our objectives. Yeah. To ensure recovery in case of loss. And sharing data gives room for improvement. Can make future analysis, preventing risk of loss. Yeah. Building trust for collaborators. Okay. And for data security. So I see we have very good responses, and all these are reasons why are important reasons as to why we should archive and share data. So I wanted us to look again at just reflect on the principles back on the last session on Tuesday, where we looked at some principles for in generating, using, and managing our data. And in enhancing this principle of the transparency and open communication, there are guidelines that have been produced for researchers that to enable them in the sharing and in the archiving and sharing of the data. And these principles, this set of principles are termed as the FAIR data principle, which aim at making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and also reusable. So this, as we tend to go towards the archiving and sharing, we have to look back and reflect on whether our data align with these principles. And so these principles are mainly focused on the archiving and sharing of data that is in digital formats, but I think it could also apply to other forms of data as well that are not in digital formats. So what it means as findable, when we say making data findable, this means that every sort of data and associated materials should have sufficient metadata, that is information about the data, and they should have unique and persistent identifiers such as the digital object identifiers to be able to find that data in the supplementary materials. And to make our data accessible, it means that this data and the metadata should be understandable by humans and also machines, and that this data should be stored in trusted repositories where any person looking for this data can access. And interoperability of this of our data means that the data and the metadata have to use some sort of a formal and formal language, which is broadly applicable, so that it could be representative of the broad field that you are sharing your data with. And the reusability of the data here means that the data collections should have a clear usage license indicating the terms of use, and also providing accurate information on the sources of that data and associated materials. So these are principles that are very commonly used by right now, the FAIR data principles that guide this sharing and archiving of our data. So we will now look at a video that tries to put these principles into perspectives in the practical sense, and also gives us information on what we need to consider when archiving data. I hope you can see this video. Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
I can see the video.
Archiving research data and highlights ethical aspects such as gaining consent from respondents and confidentiality of personal data. Why should I archive my data? In the past and still today, in some cases, researchers have been reluctant to share their data. This might be because they fear someone else might get the credit for the work they have done, or perhaps they want more time to do their own analysis. However, most funding bodies are now viewing research data as a public resource and insisting that data are put into the public domain in a timely fashion. There are many advantages to sharing data, including encouraging scientific inquiry and debate, promoting innovation and potential new uses of the data, possible new collaborations between researchers, maximising transparency and accountability, encouraging the improvement and validation of research methods, eliminating the need to collect the same data again, thus reducing time and costs, increasing the impact and visibility of the research. General principles of archiving might include publicly funded research data are a public good which should be made openly available in a timely and responsible manner. Sufficient metadata should be recorded and made available to enable others to understand the research and the potential reuse of the data. Researchers should have a limited period of privileged use of the data collected to enable them to publish the results of their research. This time might vary, but is expected to be no longer than 2 years. All users of the data should acknowledge the sources of their data and abide by the terms and conditions under which they are accessed. You should not be able to identify individuals from archived data. With quantitative data, anonymization is relatively straightforward. You might, for instance, remove direct identifiers. This would include names, addresses, phone numbers, etc. These are not usually necessary for secondary research, but are collected for checking purposes or to enable follow-up. These variables should be replaced by a code in the data. You might aggregate or reduce the precision of a variable. For example, rather than the full birth date of an individual, you might just record the month and the year. If the values for an individual respondent are unusual within the wider group researched, you could collapse unusually large or small values into a single code. For example, a top code of 50 hectares or more could be applied to land ownership. With qualitative data such as interview transcriptions, removing identifiers could distort the data. One suggestion is to use pseudonyms or replacement terms or vaguer descriptions. For example, instead of the respondent's real name, Kathy for instance, you could use a pseudonym replacing every occurrence of Kathy with Jane in all the transcripts. Instead of Station Hill Primary School, you could use a primary school. When making these changes, keep a copy of the original data for internal use and keep a log of all replacements used. If you have audio-visual data to anonymize, this is much more of a challenge. If this is likely to be an issue, it is better to obtain the participants' consent to use and share the data unaltered. Informed consent is an...
Okay, so we covered the informed consent, so I'll just move into another bit of
what should I archive? Because when we archive data, it is not just the data that we archive. Many data files have limited use without the accompanying documentation. At the minimum, your archive should include the activity protocol so others can clearly see the focus of your research, the data management plan to show the steps you intended to follow to ensure high quality data. If you've used a data entry system, then this should be included. The fieldworker manual will detail the procedures used to collect the data. Include the blank questionnaires. Adding variable names to the questionnaire would be useful. The data quality report would highlight any problem areas in the data and give suggestions for its use. The metadata document is used to describe the data, etc. So to summarize, there are clear benefits to archiving and sharing, but there are also responsibilities. You must ensure the confidentiality of your respondents, ensure you have informed consent from respondents, and your data have been anonymized. Think of data sharing as a two-way process. If you are not willing to share your data, you cannot expect others to share theirs with you.
Okay. So let's go back to our presentation. So I just wanted us to reflect a bit on the video that you're seeing, and I had a question, but I will just pose this question as to any reflections for your reflections as we continue with the presentation, but you can put in the chat of what you have got from this from this video on the different ways that we can anonymize data for archiving. So if you have any questions regarding the videos the things that have been mentioned there, please put in the chat and I will take them after the presentation. And to in more resources on this, please check the principles for archiving and sharing data, and also the checklist for documents to be archived that are in the resource, the code site. So now let us look, we have looked at the different reasons, we have looked at what we should consider when archiving data. What are the facilities then that can help us to archive data? So one way one can do this is through developing or creating these facilities called the document and data storage facilities, which are simply a place where you can store your on the laptop, where you can store your data, your project data and documents, and set some rules to enable the project team to use it effectively and efficiently. And these document and data storage facilities are sometimes facilitated with the use of the cloud storage facilities such as Google Drive, Dropbox, and OneDrive, which enable an easy collaboration of data between partners within your projects, and also enables you to access your data and documents from any place. And it does provide some protection against hardware failures, and also saves you the money and time in terms of the maintenance required to maintain these servers, because it is a responsibility of the server providers. So more of this, of the creation of the document and data storage facilities will be covered in module 2. So where you will be guided on how to create a document and data storage facilities for yourself and of your projects as well. And the other form that one can use to, another facility that one can use to archive data is through online data repositories, where there is one common one, which is known as the Dataverse. And this is an open source data repository software that enables communities to create the data repositories through the software. And so you can find that some institutions have got these data repositories in Dataverse or any other online data repositories, but this is a common one. And the good thing about this is there is a free data repository that is open to any researcher, and that is the Harvard Dataverse repository. So researchers from any fields can create their Dataverse collections in there where they can use it to archive their data, to share their data and publish it, and also access and explore other researchers' data. And also this creating a Dataverse in the Harvard Data Repository, which we'll look at in a few minutes, and gives you the power to also decide on who you will give access to your data, and also whether you want to restrict it and just make it within, provide access within your team members, and for any person who's requiring your data from the Dataverse, from the Harvard Dataverse, will have to adhere to some terms, and therefore you customize those terms by yourself. So I want us now to just have a look at, okay, just trying to find, yeah. Okay, so hoping you can see a window with what is this? The Harvard Database website. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so if you follow the link for the Harvard Database that is provided in the resources, you'll find that in this website, you are allowed to deposit in this repository, the Harvard Database repository. You're allowed to deposit and share your data, and also organize it and also publish it. And the good thing about this Dataverse repository is that for whatever data that you publish, it will give you a unique identifier it will provide a unique identifier for your data, that is the digital object identifier, and also provide some standard citation for your data, so that anybody that will use your data will be able to cite and give credit to you. And as you can see, it is open to any sort of fields. There are a lot of like agricultural sciences. We can see about 4,000 and something. And when adding data, you can, okay, there was another website, sorry. I can't really open the other one. Where is that? Okay. Sorry, I had a window open and right now I cannot see it, but here it is, yeah. Okay. So this is an example of the data sets that are available within the Harvard Database repository, which are provided with information. And when you're interested with a certain data set, then you can look into it and see whether it is made public or it is not, and whether there are any terms that a protocol that you will need to follow through so that you can access that data. Okay. Okay, so that's about the Harvard Data Repository, and it's free. So any researcher interested can use that. And for resources on how to create a Dataverse in the Harvard Data Repository, please check out these two resources that are also found under the course site. But I also wanted to remind us ourselves as to why we ought to publish data, or why it is important. So we know that this publishing data is sometimes required by journals, and it's in some journals I just do allow this publication of our data along with our research articles that we submit in those journals. But it is encouraged because most data repositories, these online data repositories like Dataverse, do provide these identifiers, which ensure that your published data is findable, is secure, accessible, and also cited appropriately. And therefore, along all these benefits, we find that our data, as you mentioned earlier, in your responses of why we are archiving and sharing, is that our data is kept in accessible formats in the long term, and that we get due credit through our publication, and also increase the visibility of our data by other researchers when we publish it, rather than staying or locking it within our team, our project teams. Yeah, so that's it from the parts of archiving and sharing. And so maybe I will welcome a few questions now.